Spooky Yowookie Pumpkin. Posted by you/satisfy curiosity. My first kiss is now a wanted murderer. TLDR, the guy that was my first kiss went on the run from the police a couple of months after for 2 counts of attempted murder. Later changed to 1 count of attempted murder and 1 count of murder after one of the victims died from complications. Background: I.F. was 15 at the time, grade 10/sophomore in high school. I grew up in a small farming town, population at the time was 1,400, in Washington State, USA. I met Ricky, M., in shop class, where we flirted daily. I was the only girl in the class and assumed that was why he was flirting with me. I also assumed he was 16 since he was in my grade but had his license. He was actually 19. In school I was popular in that I was friends with everyone, but Ricky was very handsome and very popular for actually being cool. So I was super excited that he paid attention to me and even flirted with me, even though like I said I figured it was because I was the only girl in class. I'll admit, I led him on in a big way. I figured nothing would ever happen between he and I since he was really good looking and popular, and had beautiful girls throwing themselves at him in the hallways and other classes. So the flirting had become more and more sexual with us talking about having sex, even though I had no intention and thought it was never going to happen anyway. Shop class had a regular classroom in the high school where we took attendance and tests, and then the shop itself was located about 100 yards away from the main building. The high school parking lot was on the opposite side of the high school building from the shop class. Our school had open campus, meaning that students could leave campus during lunch if they had the signed form filed with the office. Experience: in late spring of that year, 1997, Ricky and I were flirting one day when he suggested we go through with it. He suggested we leave right after that class, during lunch, and head to his house. I don't know why I agreed other than realizing I had talked and talked for weeks about it and couldn't admit I had been lying the whole time. After class he and I left the shop and walked around the back of the school to the parking lot. We got in his nice truck and drove away from the school. I was freaking out internally because 1. My friends were expecting me to leave campus with them and were waiting by my locker, and 2. Was I really about to have sex for the first time with one of the hottest guys in school? We drove through town and went to his house about half a mile from campus. We went inside and as soon as the door closed he started kissing me. To this day this first kiss is one of the best I've ever had. I couldn't completely appreciate it at the time because I was still freaking out. We made our way to his bed and continued kissing for 45 minutes while he kept trying to get me to go further. He had stripped down to his boxers but I still had everything on including shoes and jacket. He wasn't pushy, just trying to go with what we had discussed for weeks. After 45 minutes I said I wanted to go back to the school. He sighed, put his clothes back on and we left. We drove to the school in silence. When we got to the parking lot he asked if I was okay. I said yes and got out and walked quickly inside. Out of my peripheral vision I saw his truck leaving the parking lot. Lunch was still going on so I went to my locker, grabbed my books for my next class, and went in the classroom to read until class started. Shortly before class started 2 of my friends that I was supposed to meet for lunch came in. They asked if I was okay and where I had gone. I said I was fine and didn't want to talk about it. One of the girls then left to go to her class but the other girl, Allie, was in the class with me so she stayed. About halfway through class, I decided to tell Allie what had happened and made her promise not to tell anyone. She was concerned and made sure that I realized that I had put myself in a dangerous situation. No one knew where I was or with whom. I hadn't even thought of that until she pointed it out. The next few days, Ricky went to school but skipped shop class. I was fine with it since I didn't want to see him, mostly because I was embarrassed. Ricky started coming to class again and tried talking to me, but I was quite rude. For about a week shop class consisted of him trying to talk to me ignoring him sighing and walking away. After that I was more civil, but never went back to flirting with him. He started approaching me between classes and during lunch, just being friendly and lightly flirty. I never returned the flirting again. Random groups of girls started approaching me and asking what was going on between Ricky and I, why did he like me, why was he now ignoring them, etc. I didn't have answers. The second to last week of school Ricky hung around me often, but was really quiet. Then he told me that I was the first girl to ever turn him down. During the last week of school he went back to hanging out with his friends and flirting with the pretty girls. I was relieved mostly because I felt guilty for leading him on and guilty for putting myself that situation. About midway through the summer holiday I ran into Allie and she asked if I had heard about Ricky. No, I hadn't. She said Ricky was on the run from the police for the attempted murders of 2 men. She said she heard it was a drug deal gone bad. I was shocked and I let my imagination go wild with thoughts of what if. I assumed that if he was willing to murder 2 men, what would have stopped him from raping and murdering me? A year later one of the men died from complications from his wounds, so the charges were changed to 1 charge of attempted murder and 1 charge of murder in the first degree. I later found out that it wasn't a drug deal gone bad but was actually a failed cartel hit. I have more info on that and why I don't believe Ricky would have ever harmed me, or anyone, if it hadn't been for his dad's employer, but this story is quite long enough. I don't know what happened to Ricky. I heard he fled to California and then possibly to Mexico. He was never caught by the police. Even though I don't think he was a bad guy when I knew him, I still hope we never meet again. Posted by u/Endermanowen. Me and my brother were almost kidnapped walking to 7-Eleven. My parents didn't like me or my brother going somewhere by ourselves, so someone always had to come with us. It was summer and it was very hot. The town I live in is normally very cold, so no one was prepared for the massive heat wave. My brother wanted to go to 7-Eleven, but me, being the annoying video game obsessed 12-year-old I was, said no, so my brother got my dad and I was forced to go. I live at the bottom of a street that is intersected by a very busy street. This comes into play later on in the story. There is a crappy apartment complex at the top of the street. When me and my brother passed by it, we noticed a man hanging out by the back of a dumpster. We thought nothing of it and kept walking. Later on we noticed the man was following close behind us. Red flag number 1, when he saw us looking at him he stopped completely. Red flag number 2. We reached 7-Elevens a few blocks later and the guy was nowhere to be found. We went in and got our Slurpees, paid for them, and when we turned around to leave we saw the man peering into the window at us. He pulled his head away when he saw us. The cashier noticed and asked if we knew him. We said no. She asked where we live and where we are going so she could call the police if she saw him follow us. She told us to run if he got close. Later on my parents questioned the cashier desk ion to send us home, but I like to think she saved my life. She still works there and I thank her whenever I see her. We began our walk back, and the man was definitely following us. We crossed to the other side of the street. He waited to cross over. By the time he crossed we were safe distance ahead of him. The only thing I remember about him is that he was wearing jeans, a blue Adidas jacket, and matching blue shoes. We had reached the halfway point between the apartments and 7-Elevens when he started fidgeting with hands in his pockets. I started hyperventilating. My brother noticed and he asked, "What's wrong with you?" I told him to hop on my back so I could whisper to him. I explained to him that there was a man following us. I told him to run as fast as he could if the man coughed up to us. I also told him to leave me behind if he had to. He started crying quietly into his shirt. I glanced back and the man was speed walking towards us with a shiny object in his hand, and he was getting quite close to us. I turned to my brother and whispered, "I'm going to count to 3 and we are going to run. 1, 2, 3. I screamed. I started sprinting home, with my brother's arm in a death grip. Heard heavy footsteps behind me and knew he was chasing us. We had reached the apartments when we heard the distant sirens. We turned to run down the street and had gotten halfway down the street before the police arrived. The man ran into someone's yard and hopped the fence into the alley. The police were very nice to my family and they said they would search the apartments and stay outside our house for a few nights until they found the guy. They found his apartment and his belongings had all been taken in a hurry. They said stuff was left out all over the place as if someone had to leave quickly. To this day they haven't found him. I'm 14 now and whenever I get off my bus and walk down that street I can't help but look over my shoulder.